Welcome to Anatomy of Failure, the podcast where we dissect what went wrong so you can get it right. I'm your host, Ivy Walker. In today's episode, When Founders Collide, Navigating Co-Founder Relationships, we're tackling one of the biggest reasons high-potential startups fail, co-founder relationships. Recent research shows that over half of these ventures collapse due to unresolved tensions and mismatched expectations between partners. Joining me today is my co-founder from one of my ventures, Kelly Richmond Pope. Together, we'll look back on our entrepreneurial journey, what brought us together, the friction points we faced, and how we've managed to come out on the other side. Whether you're thinking of launching a business with a friend or already managing co-founder dynamics, this episode is for you. Ready to get started? Let's dive in. So, Kelly, thank you for joining me today.
Of course. I'm happy to be here.
I appreciate you sitting down to talk to me about co-founder relationships. So I did some research and I learned that for high potential startups, which is what I would consider Helios to have been when we started over 10 years ago.
Been 10 years?
Oh, yeah, that was 2013. So it's 12 years almost. Yeah. February of 2013. So for high potential startups, about 66% of them fail because of co-founder conflict. And now Helios didn't fail, but it never became what it should have become based on your skills and my skills and the combination that would have produced. And so as I told you, I've been doing a lot of reflection on just, my choices and the things that I've done. And I reflected on our relationship and what happened with the partnership that we started off with. And so I want to let the viewers and listeners know that we've never actually had a conversation about...
This is the first live conversation, live and raw.
And this is really a conversation. It's not an interview. We're just going to talk about kind of what happened. But I want to start off with a little bit about your background to set the stage for how the idea even came about, because it was your baby. So tell us your background.
So my background is I'm an accounting professor by day and by night. I have a PhD in accounting and I'm a CPA, and I've been teaching for a long time. So 24 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I love the classroom, but I liked to bring new things into the classroom, and the textbook publishers never really have anything new. So I started with my first documentary called Crossing the Line, Ordinary People Committing Extraordinary Crimes. I was using the DePaul video tech people and just going around doing these interviews. And I had enough interviews to turn it into a documentary, and I started using it in class, and then other people started wanting to use it in their classes. And I said, maybe there's something here. Little did I know how hard it would be to get professors to change to do something new. So, but that's where the idea came from, just the classroom.
Yeah. And so you are a global fraud expert. You've been studying fraud for a while. You've interviewed lots of fraudsters and whistleblowers. So let's just really set the stage for your qualifications. This is your field. You have a book that recently came out, Fool Me Once.
Yes, Scam Stories and Secrets from the $1 trillion Fraud Industry.
And that's all about
fraud, how it happens. So it's about the fraudsters, the perpetrators, and the victims. So the whole fraud kind of triangle.
Okay.
Triangle of people.
So what was it? You did Crossing the Line. The documentary was what, 2008, 9?
That would have been, so it came out right the year we started. So we started February 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was tenured. I went from an assistant to an associate professor January. So I had that meeting, my university meeting. So it was right around the same time. So I had been working on it before, but it came out officially right around 2013.
Okay.
So same time period, which I had that content. So I was just like, okay, what am I supposed to do with all this extra stuff that I didn't use in the documentary? So that was really the start of having just like scraps or pieces of things that I could do something with.
And at that time, I had just left a health tech startup and was planning to do another health tech startup and was sort of in the process of doing some research. And I had one employee who was doing a bunch of research. And then you and I were introduced by a former professor of mine from Kellogg. And I remember the first time I met you, I thought, she's really smart. And for an accountant, she's actually got a personality.
Oh, please. Lots of accountants have personalities.
I don't know about that. But
They do. Don't.
But you had a lot of personality. And so I remember being attracted to that because I thought, when you were talking about this business idea that you had, that I could see why somebody would want to use what you use in the classroom, because you looked like a professor that was doing something interesting. So we were introduced by this professor, and he said to me, she's got an idea, but she needs somebody who's done a startup before. Can you talk to her? And my first reaction was, yeah, I'll talk to her, but I'm not partnering with anybody. Like I got my own thing, and I'm not looking for a partner. So when we started working together, it was really that I was going to raise funds for you. I was going to help you raise capital for the business. So when you had this concept in your mind of turning these scraps, so to speak, these interviews that you had into a business, what was your vision? And did you have one at that time?
I thought everybody would want to use the scraps, so the vision was, I knew other professors were looking for things, but what they said they wanted and what they actually would do are two different things. So my idea was it would just take over the world, and all the people would start using all these video clips and video cases in their classroom. That was my idea. And because so many people were interested in crossing the line, I was like, okay, there's some momentum here. So that's what I thought.
Now, there was also a corporate component, right?
There was a corporate component.
So the same content was applicable for corporate ethics use.
Sure. There was a whole CPE, continuing professional education arm. And so it's not as though there wasn't interest from a market. So there was. So that's why I thought, okay, yeah, there could be a business here, but it was just a little harder than I thought.
It always is. I don't know if you recall, but I told you it always costs twice as much and takes twice as long when you're starting a business. And, and that's being nice. It's usually 10 times as long and 5 times as much. Okay, so we're sitting in, this is 2012, actually. So this is before Helios was launched. You and I met in 2012. And I wanted to help you raise the capital. And I remember we went out and we met with a couple different people. And we finally settled on an investor that I had a previous relationship with who was going to put some money into the business. Tell me about how that struck you, because I remember we had a conversation about him coming into the business and me being in the business and what that meant for your control over the business. Tell me how that struck you.
It didn't make me feel uneasy. I mean, I think it was just questions anybody would have, because you knew him, I didn't know him. But I felt like maybe it'll work better because you already know him. And so that initial no one knowing anybody would not be there. So I didn't think anything negative. I probably didn't think anything. And maybe I should have thought something, but I was just like, okay, all right, well, if this is how we're going to raise funds, then this is how we're going to raise funds. It can't be that bad, Do
you remember the conversation we had about me being CEO of the company?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you thought about that conversation, because I remember that conversation pretty well. I was nervous to bring the conversation to you because it was your idea. And what we'd heard from the potential investors were that because I had the experience, they would prefer to see me as CEO. Tell me if that had any impact on you.
No.
You didn't have any ego ruffling of being told that you couldn't be CEO?
No.
No? Okay. I was really nervous to have that conversation with you.
So here's the thing. So there's a dynamic that we're not talking about is I was still a professor. Mm-hmm. So I never left DePaul. And we talked about that dynamic. So it wasn't anything that I minded. I felt like someone was going to do it full time. Mm-hmm. It couldn't be me. Mm-hmm. And if it was going to be me, I would need to leave. At that time, I was tenured. And so there's like 5 Black tenured female accounting professors on the planet. And I'm joking, but there's not a lot of us. So I knew leaving wasn't an option. So no, I don't recall feeling that way. Now, do you recall me feeling that way?
No, I don't recall you reacting negatively to the notion of me being CEO, but I do recall you saying that if you weren't going to be CEO, you had to own majority interest, like so that Stuart and I could never gang up on you.
Oh,
right. So,
and somebody probably told me to say that because I'm sure they did. Because the interesting thing I think about us is we did not know each other.
No.
So we were complete strangers. We were like an arranged marriage, like a boy band.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
So I can remember, and I don't know who it was. It was probably one of my friends, like, girl, you need to do such and such. But I didn't think anything of it. I just, I'm not like, okay, how can I strategize this way? I wasn't thinking that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure someone told me. It might have been Lonnie. Who knows? But that's my husband. Sorry, Lonnie. But anyhow, yeah. But that wasn't my natural thought to think like, you need to do this because they're going to take advantage. You're like, how can someone take advantage of something that's in your head? Like, so that wasn't my natural. My natural position isn't this.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that because that was my natural position.
Okay.
My natural position was because I had come from situations where I had worked in environments where people frequently tried to take advantage of me. Mm-hmm. And I even had people I had worked for who would say, you are so smart, but I'm the one that everybody is going to look to. You don't command the room the way that I do. So we're just going to use your smarts and we're going to use my bravado. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way, it'll work. And so I was very defensive coming into the situation, which is why I didn't want a partner coming into the situation because I had experienced working, and these were not partners. These were people I worked for, but these were people I worked very closely with. Mm-hmm. And so I came in with that baggage. So I was looking for like, okay, all right, like, well, how is this going to pop off?
And I probably like, okay. And you're probably like, okay, what's wrong with her?
Right, exactly. What's the catch? What's the catch? Okay.
No, I felt like from the beginning, we had complementary differences.
Yes.
And so
that's absolutely true.
So I didn't feel like, I felt like there was enough space for everybody. I did. And so I had spent so much time alone that I welcomed the opportunity to be like, oh gosh, like there's another person around. Because academics is a lonely role. You're by yourself all the time. You write by yourself. You go to conferences by yourself. Everything is lonely. So yeah, I just was like, oh, okay.
So let's talk about our first website. So the very first website that we put up for Helios, I had this whole idea about storytelling.
I remember this conversation. I was like, what is you talking about? Storytelling. What was it? Oh God, there was a tagline.
The story matters.
Yes. And I was like, but okay.
You did not like that.
It just seemed wonky a little bit, but I'm like, okay, you know what? If that's what you think.
So that was actually not your original response. Your original response was, I got an email from you at like 2 a.m. because you were known for sending those emails 1, 2, 3 a.m. But I was up working. So
you read it.
I see this email and your response was, oh no, this has to come down. I can't be associated with this. I was like, what?
So, okay. So if that were the email, maybe that was the first time I saw it.
It absolutely was the first time. Okay. And cards on the table. I hadn't even told you that was the direction I was going in, right? I hadn't given you any like mock-ups or any thoughts. Like I just ran with it. You introduced me to Keith, who had been doing your website stuff previously.
Yes.
And so I, got with Keith and just ran with it and sent you a link at like midnight.
Take a look at it.
and that was the response I got back. What did you think of that? It was not what you were expecting. What did you think about that and the way I brought it to you without any sort of preview or discussion or anything?
Well, I just, at the moment, if that was my response back to you, it was just like, tell her how you feel. Like, now that you asked me the question, I probably should have been like, well, damn, like, shouldn't we have talked about this?
Yeah.
But I think I was just in the moment. And if that was my response, then it was just like, no, like, we should be collabing on this.
Yeah.
Like, we should be talking about this.
Yeah.
And I guess we didn't. And so maybe that was the oh no, because maybe it was more about the lack of collaboration than the actual thing, because it stayed. I mean, so it's not like it changed. It was just like, we've then had a conversation about it. And when you said, whatever you said, I'm like, okay, let's.
Actually, it was some dude in London who told you it was a good idea. And you went to some school in London to do a lecture.
Oh, I went with that. And he was a lawyer.
And you told them about the storytelling. He was like, that's a good approach. And then you called me and you were like, okay, so-and-so thinks it's a good approach, so maybe we can go with it. And I was like, okay, so now I already started like this, and now I'm really like this, right?
And
right.
I'm like, okay, but we'll go, well, fine.
Yeah, right. So I'm reading, I'm assuming that this posture is coming back to me because it wasn't your vision for what the direction the company would take. That's the story I'm telling myself.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was still the same vision. It was just a tagline that was like, okay, this is what we're doing, but it was still the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it was easy to say, okay, and we're, still same content, still the same process. So, okay, we'll try it out. And if it doesn't work, we can change it.
Yeah. And so at what point in the relationship did you start to think this wasn't the way you wanted it to be?
I think it wasn't you and I. I think it was just it was such a slow build, and ed tech is just insanely impossible. I remember our meeting we had with that investor. Do you remember, he was a private equity guy.
Oh, yes.
I won't say his name, but you remember.
Yes.
And we had a great meeting with him. And at that point, I thought, okay, maybe we're going to get some traction. Yeah. And it was a great meeting.
Yeah.
And so I think it was never a you, me thing, at least for me, which is why we still have always kept a relationship. Yeah. It was just hard. It was just so hard, and not understanding, like, I thought I had a better understanding of the market than I actually did. I thought people would change and adopt things quicker than they actually did. So I don't think it was ever, I don't like or can get along or work with Ivy. It was just hard and slow.
Yeah.
You know?
It was definitely hard and it was definitely slow. And I was all in financially.
Yeah.
Right? I was fully exposed financially, right? I was there 100%. And that was at some point started to wear on me.
For sure.
Because I felt like, and again, this is the story I'm telling myself. This is the perception of what I see. I felt like because you weren't as exposed as I was, that maybe it wasn't as urgent for you as it felt for me.
Yeah,
right?
I can understand that.
And so but I never articulated that. And so...
Yes, you did.
Did I?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, you did. Multiple times.
Did I really?
Yes. Okay. All the time.
Okay.
I mean, I would say, and not in a like kind of mean way, just a matter of fact. I mean, you are a very direct person. I don't mind a direct person because I mean, there's no guessing. You don't have, if you don't like something, you're going to know it, you know? So you would say that. And I understood that. And it wasn't not known.
Yeah. Okay.
It wasn't not known.
Okay. Well, I remember a particularly contentious meeting that we had. It was me, you, and Stuart. And this is when I had felt like I had reached my boiling point. Like I was super stressed. The business actually wasn't doing terribly. I mean, it was generating cash flow. We had a couple of employees. Like it was, but it still wasn't where I thought it should be or could have been. And you, because you're so multi-talented, you had Helios, you had DePaul, and then you had like 25 other things that people wanted you to do. There was always something. Somebody wanted Kelly to speak or do this, do that. And you had the documentary, right? You had All the Queen's Horses was going on at this time. So this was we're in 2016, 2017.
Okay. But you were in the documentary too.
Yeah. Yes, but I didn't have 5 jobs in addition to the documentary, right? So you're working on all these things and I'm like, okay.
But all the things though, I think brought in people into the business. So I think my thinking was, going to the schools, talking here, that brings more professors, more things, more. So,
and that is correct. That's absolutely correct. And I sort of saw that, but what I wanted to see was more direct attention. It was indirect attention that was leading things into the company, again, because of the stress I was feeling, I wanted to see more direct attention. So you and I sat down with Stuart because Stuart had I think realized that things were kind of heating up. And so we sat down, we were in our office that was on Madison.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think it's the only time he came.
Yes. That would be correct. That would be correct. So we sat down, and at that point, you and I had talked about you coming into the business full time. And when we started, you had indicated you were interested in being in the business full time. But then it was, well, I have tenure and you don't give up tenure, which I understood. It just wasn't the expectation, right? And so we were talking and Stuart gave us each a chance to say our thing. And I said my thing. And I remember you were like, you don't give up tenure. Like you were mad that I was even pressing the issue.
You don't give up tenure.
And I'm like, okay, fine. If that's how you feel, then you can't have majority ownership in the company. Do you remember that conversation?
I remember. Yeah. I remember the meeting. Yeah, I do. I don't think I hit the table.
Oh, yes, you did. You were mad. You were mad.
So it might have been, if I hit the table, it's because maybe you two were having a conversation.
No.
I think that doesn't even sound like me.
No, you were mad. And I later, as I thought about it, the way the conversation played out, it could have felt to you like a 2-on-1.
Maybe.
And so, I had said later, like, maybe we should have done that a little bit differently or brought in a neutral third party to have that conversation. Because
I don't even know how you give up tenure. Like, I mean, just, I don't even, like, it's funny that we're talking about it because I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't retire because I hadn't been there long enough.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. So if I hit it's like, do they even know what they're talking about? Like, that's like...
And the answer is no.
So I'm like, you're asking me to do... It's not like just like leaving a job. Yeah. Like, because it's more of a life thing.
Yeah.
So like, that's, I'm probably like, do they even know what this means?
And no, we didn't. We didn't. But at that point, I was feeling like, okay, we talked about you coming into the business full time. Is that ever going to happen? And I think that's when we got clear that was not going to happen, that you were not coming into the business full time. Now, after you signed the share redistribution agreement, I didn't see much of you after that.
Mm-hmm.
What was happening for you?
So if that was around, was that around All the Queen's Horses?
Mm-hmm. That was 2016.
So there was a ton of travel around that time. I don't think it had any, like, I'm going back, we're 8 years now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think it had anything to do with the shared part. I think it just had to do with the busyness part. There was a ton of travel with the movie. Probably more than I thought, because I didn't go to DePaul that much. Mm-hmm. So it's not like I was sitting in my office like, they're down the street. And it wasn't that. I didn't go there much. So the lack of attention or a lack of presence was everywhere. It wasn't like I was there and not there. So, but you probably didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't that. I mean, when I think back to that launch of the movie, I mean, it is still happening. Like, we're in 2024, about to be 2025. It's still happening. So there was a lot of travel around. So I think it was more that than anything like I'm mad, because everything that you were saying, that Stuart was saying, was logical. Like, it wasn't, because I think at that point, correct me if I'm wrong, at that meeting, didn't you need or ask for more money? You needed more money or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And everything you said made sense. It wasn't, so it wasn't like I walked out of that meeting like I'm mad at them.
Mm-hmm.
Because that wasn't just my spirit. Like, I wasn't like that. Because it made sense what you were saying.
Yeah.
So I think it just had to do with just busyness and anything. Because this was your livelihood. This was what you were doing. And everything you said made sense.
So fast forward, we didn't interact a whole lot. You spent a lot of time with our employee because she was full-time on the movie.
You went to Malaysia. I was looking at those pictures.
You guys went to Malaysia. I didn't get to go.
You gotta go. I'm sure you were the first call. You probably told me no.
Yeah, I'm sure I probably did. But see, you were spending time on that. And then there was the premiere of the documentary. And then, just things sort of moved on from there. But there was never, after the documentary, we never really worked together again. Like, we would have a phone call or we would exchange emails, but we never really worked together again. Have you thought about what?
Well, I think the last thing we did is we turned the documentary into the CPE. So we did things sort of like parallel. Yeah. Because when did we do like the whole, like the AICPA? Like,
it was 2017, 2018.
Again, I'm thinking that you didn't want to, but not that. Nothing more, because I was with Kristen. So it's like she was like, we were due stuff.
Yeah.
So I just thought maybe you didn't want to, you know, but not, I don't know.
Yeah. Did you find me difficult to work with? And you can be honest.
No, not difficult. Direct. That's the wrong D word. Direct. You're direct. I mean, you're smart. You're logical. You have good ideas. You weren't difficult to work with because you always knew where you stood.
Yeah.
At least I thought I did.
Did you think I was bossy?
No, you didn't boss me around. No.
But did you think I was trying to be overly controlling or any of those things?
You wanted to win. You wanted it to be successful. I wanted to be successful. So that's how I took it. You know, I don't think the only thing that I remember, the only emotion that I remember having is you are always, well, if you have an idea, prove it. Like that was about it. And so after a while, that kind of, prove it can get exhausting.
Yeah.
But that's it. But that's the only thing I would take away saying, like, if you're going to say something to you, it's more like, well, you need to prove it to me first. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you will, and sometimes you're like, girl, whatever. I'm not doing all that. Yeah. That I don't think that's difficult. That's just your style.
Yeah.
Do you think you're difficult?
I think, honestly, reflecting back over my interactions with you, that there were plenty of times when I was being difficult. there were plenty of times when I was in my feelings, and the feeling that I was in was fear. Mm-hmm. Like, that was an ever-present thing, because when we launched Helios, I was gung-ho about, getting this done. And I was prepared for the financial sacrifice that was going to be required. But what I wasn't prepared for was my child getting sick. Mm. And that happened. I had to pull her out of school 2 months after we started Helios. And not knowing what was wrong with her, and trying to launch this company. I remember we had a conference like in that April. So we marched in February. There was a conference here in Chicago, an academic conference in April. And I remember trying to figure out how in the world I was going to be at that conference, because you were out of town doing something related to DePaul. You were, or no, you actually had like a visiting professor thing that you were doing. So you were out of town and couldn't attend. I was supposed to attend. She was basically bedridden at this point. And I remember I'd never been so stressed in my life and never been so fearful in my life, because I'm a single mother, I'm a breadwinner. If this doesn't work, then, whatever's wrong with her is going to be compounded by the fact that I'm broke, right? So I remember as I look back on all of this, that the prevalent emotion I felt was fear. And the response that I had to that was rigidity. So you got an idea, prove it was just me being like, okay, I need something to work. I need to see that you've thought about this idea. So yeah, I would say that if I had to work with me during that period, we'd a box. Yeah. So you launched a new company. I remember getting a press release that had come out about Red Flags Mania. And in the press release, there was a picture of you and your partner. And it was a cute picture, and you all were hugging each other. I was like, I was like, really?
You're funny.
She was never that nice to me.
I'm not mean. You're so silly.
No, I remember thinking like, I wish that, we could have had a more cordial partnership. And I saw that and I was like, okay, all right. So tell us about Red Flags Mania and what brought you to start another partnership.
Okay, so Red Flag Mania started because a then associate provost who's gone from DePaul said, you need to apply for a grant. And we have these grants. And I was like, I'm not applying for anything unless I know I'm going to get it. So if you can ensure that I'm going to get it and I can do what I want with it, then I'll apply. So that's how the idea or the funding came. And she was my neighbor. So I had known her for a long time. So it was a different relationship. We weren't strangers. I think that brings... it hasn't really brought any major challenges because I knew her. And she, at the time, was out of a job. And so she was a marketing person. So that's where it came from. That's where it started. And I guess, what was your question like?
How would you characterize your experience in that partnership as different from somebody that you knew versus somebody in arranged marriage? Like those are two very different approaches.
So I think because I knew her personally, I already knew how she moved. She probably knew less about how I moved, but I knew how she moved because Lonnie had worked with her. So that was the difference.
Okay.
So that her initial hurdle of not knowing someone wasn't there. And we knew the same people. So there was never really a 2 against 1.
Yeah.
It was always we knew the same people pretty much the same way. If they knew her 30%, they knew me 30%. So it was a little bit more, I guess, equal.
Yeah.
But still very similar because still 2 different people with 2 different backgrounds, with just different expertise. So I guess it's just the personal stuff was different. So whereas you were a stranger, she wasn't. So
yeah. So knowing what you know now about partnerships, because you've now had 2, what advice would you give to people looking to start a partnership? Like I said, of high potential startups, 66% fail because of co-founder relationships. In general, if you look at all businesses, about 45% fail within the first 4 years because of co-founder issues. So what would you do differently?
With you and I?
Well, just in general. If you had to start a new business and you were going in with a new co-founder, what would you do differently? Because one of the things I know I would do is I would have a conversation up front about how I work, like knowing more about myself, how I work. And you use the word direct. I do tend to be very direct. And it's good that it's something that you were able to handle and not take personally. But a lot of people take it personally.
I like direct. Because
I've had to explain to many people, it's not about you. I'm not saying you're a bad person. It's never personal. Mm-hmm. I just tend to ask questions that come to my mind, right?
Yeah.
I'm not prosecuting you or persecuting you. Yeah. I just want to understand better. So I now take that step of explaining to people that it's never personal. The other thing I think I would do is I think I would have a written partnership agreement so that we, in the beginning, Stuart used to say, contracts aren't for the times when you like each other. They're for the times when you hate each other, mm-hmm. right? And I've learned that to be a truism, mm-hmm. right? The honeymoon phase, we all agree to whatever. We want to keep it nice. We want to keep it flowing. And then sometimes things change or sometimes we forget what we said. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely do, a written sort of MOU. This is mm-hmm. what we're agreeing to. Not to say that can't change mm-hmm. later, but just so we understand the starting point.
Yeah. I pause because I think when we started, I think if we had started with more money, I think that would have helped. That would have helped like the stress that you were having. Like, I think we didn't start with enough money.
Agreed.
And I think that put a big strain on a lot of things. So I paused because I don't think we had a bad working relationship. Like, I wouldn't say, anybody watching this would see we still have good rapport. Like, it's not like I'm sitting here like.
Yeah. But if you were a different person, you would be sitting here like, I can't stand her.
No, because at the end of the day, Ivy, we both wanted to win. Yeah. We wanted to make money. We wanted to win. We could put everything aside to try to get to that.
Yeah, so that was true. That's true.
I mean, we had far more in common than different. I mean, our styles weren't that different, I mean, we both wanted to win. And that, I never walked out with my feelings hurt. Like, oh my gosh, you hurt my feelings. I mean, you said it. Okay, let's move. Let's figure out how we're going to win.
Yeah.
So that's why I paused when I was like, what would I do differently? Or what would the advice be? I think in our situation, making sure we had enough runway for you to feel the way you need, maybe 3 years of runway or 3 years of true market value of what you felt like you needed probably would be the only advice, because you did need somebody that was full time. And I think because I stayed at DePaul, it allowed the space for you to be where you needed to be, but you didn't have enough.
Yeah.
And I think that just added unnecessary stress. Because when you think about how some people start, they have these big nest eggs and a long runway, and that can just give them a little bit of more space to move. I don't think we had enough.
It's definitely less stressful if you are properly funded, right? If you're capitalized in the correct way. And we weren't. I mean, I don't think we knew how much we would need, and that's the case in general with these companies, especially, we started out, we were doing the corporate and we were doing the academic, right? So we had both of those things. And the corporate took up a lot of time, right? Because it was a lot of hand holding with, big companies.
Something you said, the corporate, I think, I'm remembering the corporate better now. I think I wished the corporate felt differently. It felt like we were more project managers of the corporate. And I didn't like that. But we needed the money.
Yeah.
So you did it, but I didn't love it. I mean, I wish that it could have been a little bit more.
It was less the creative and more the project. I mean, we created content, but we were really managing those teams and then fighting with those teams about the messaging around the ethics.
I didn't love that.
It was a lot. So. And then I remember because you in particular would get feedback that it's too much fraud, right? And you got to change that. It's too much fraud, right? And so, but that was the business, right? That was the business. And so we had to soften a lot of what we were doing. And it wasn't necessarily the compliance teams we were working with. It was like their bosses that would override what we'd agreed to with the compliance teams as being the campaigns we were rolling out on the corporate side, right? I hated that too, by the way, which is why we don't work with corporations on this anymore, because the compliance teams were a lot of fun to work with. It was the legal team that would come back and, squash what we were trying to do.
But I will say, given what we know about working together, we might work together again on another project.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that, full circle moment, I don't think we ever saw what the documentary could be together.
Yeah.
I remember when All the Queen's Horses was around, I was like, why isn't Ivy doing any speaking around the documentary? That was always my question.
I didn't think you wanted me to.
Why not?
We weren't talking. And so again, I assumed that, you wanted, because I don't know if you recall this. See, I have a great memory for bad moments in my life, right? I don't necessarily remember anything else except the moments that were like a gut punch to me. And I remember we had this conversation. You called me and you said to me that you had the idea for All the Queen's Horses before Helios started, which is true. You had all these ideas before Helios started, right? And you wanted to take the assets and wanted to work with our co-pro partner on your own, under your own name. And I remember that was such a gut punch to me. And my response was, well, you can't, because the investor, when the funds came in, all they got put into, so it belongs to the company, right? So I explained all that, and we moved forward with it being a Helios project. But it was really from that moment that I felt like you didn't want me involved with the documentary. And so I maintained the business side of the documentary, right? So I dealt with the contracts. I made sure you had what you need to get what you needed to produce it. I worked on the distribution, all of those things. I just stuck to the business side.
I thought you would come out with, because even recently, when you sent me the email about there was someone that emailed us about a screening. I was like, why didn't she do it? Why are you, you can do this, Ivy. Go to Virginia, do it. And so I never understood that because you were a part of it, So I never took it as, so I apologize for that.
Well, it was my assumption. It wasn't anything that was ever said.
Because I always thought, why isn't she talking about this? Why isn't she doing training? Why is she not? Because she can. She should. She can.
Yeah.
But I don't think we ever fully saw what it could be. And I think that there's something left for us to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah.
Because the story is back in the news.
The story is back in the news. So why don't you, for those who are listening and watching, talk about what All the Queen's Horses is? Sure.
So All the Queen's Horses is about the largest municipal fraud in U.S. history. And the city comptroller embezzled $53.7 million over a 20-year period. And her name was Rita Crunwell. And Rita Crunwell was sentenced to 19 years and 7 months on February 14th, 2013. And that's all I can say right now without laughing. I'm going to let you finish.
She recently, as of the last week, had her sentence commuted, which is ridiculous.
But even before that.
Well, she was released during COVID to home confinement. Now, this is a situation where a town was robbed blind. She was stealing virtually the entire city budget. She never expressed any regret, no remorse, none of that. She was released on home confinement, and now her sentence has been commuted. So the story itself is just bizarre because she bought 400 quarter horses with all that money, and she lived real high on the hog on the town's dime, right? And so it's an outstanding documentary that you directed.
I couldn't have done it without you, though. I'm not even going to sit there and say that because no.
Well, you spent many years working on pulling that together.
As did you.
Yes. It was a lot of time. We raised money to do it. And we actually pulled off the impossible. Every time I talk to people about the fact that our documentary was on Netflix and it was the top documentary in the country when it premiered in 2017. And we did it on like a $300,000 budget.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and that is in-kind money, even in that $300,000.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that speaks to the business side of the film and getting lemons, giving lemonade out of a bunch of lemons.
We had a bunch of lemons.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So when we worked together, we worked well together.
Yeah.
Like we complemented each other's skill sets very well. I think we were just at very different points in our lives.
Sure.
And I think a different setup, the business that we started could have gone in a different direction. But that said, you mentioned that, we're looking at doing something together again, which I completely welcome. And I'm excited if it turns into something.
Oh, it is, because there's a wrong that I need to right with the film. So we I don't know if we can talk about that on here, but yeah, it'll work out.
All right, Kelly, any last thoughts?
I'm glad to talk to you.
I'm so glad you decided that you were willing to sit down and have this conversation.
Of course. Why would I not?
You could have been like, I don't want to talk about that. That's ancient history.
No. So, I mean, I think that you can come out on the other side,
You can, yeah.
And we, like I said, we still wanted the same things, and we're going to get something.
Yeah.
Soon, very soon.
Well, thank you for joining. Thanks for listening to this candid conversation about co-founder relationships. If there's one takeaway from today's episode, it's that honesty and upfront discussions about everything from roles to finances are crucial to avoiding the pitfalls many startups face. We hope our story helps you navigate your own partnerships with greater clarity and mutual respect. If you found today's insights valuable, please subscribe, rate, and review Anatomy of Failure wherever you listen to your podcasts. Check out my website, anatomyoffailurepodcast.com, to see how you can get access to bonus content and helpful resources. Remember, we're here every episode dissecting what went wrong so you can get it right. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.